Stay tuned for another Newscenter 88 presentation on WMUL FM, Huntington. This is the Newscenter 88 Weekend Recap. Recapping the weekly news from Newscenter 88 at 5. The area's source for broadcast news across Marshall University, the tri-state area, and around the globe. Now, the Newscenter 88 Weekend Recap team.
Welcome to the first edition of Newscenter 88's Weekend Recap. I'm Waylon Smith.
And I'm Emma Johnson. Coming up on this edition of Weekend Recap.
This cannot wait. Congress needs to pass supplemental funding for Ukraine before they break for the holiday resources. As simple as that.
And John Boggess will be in with a recap of the week that was in Marshall athletics.
Now onto our top story. Thousands of protesters have rallied against the New Zealand government's Indigenous policies as the parliament convened for the first time since October elections. Demonstrations in the capital this Thursday and about a dozen other New Zealand cities and towns were organized by the Maori Party, which advocates for the rights of Indigenous New Zealanders who are known as Maori. Protesters rallied outside Parliament against what they described as the anti-Maori policies of the newly elected Conservative-led coalition government. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon says his government is, quote, deeply committed to improving outcomes for Maori and non-Maori, unquote. Lawmakers were sworn in after elections oust the center-left Labour Party government that had ruled since 2017.
The Israeli military hit Rafah in southern Gaza Wednesday night, residents say, as United Nations officials warn there are no safe places left in the besieged territory. The center of Gaza's second largest city, Han Yunis, has also seen fighting amid Israel's widening air and ground offensive in the southern part of the territory that has worsened humanitarian conditions. Arab and Islamic nations are calling for a vote this Friday on a draft UN Security Council resolution demanding a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. The Hamas-controlled health ministry says the territory's death toll has now surpassed 17,100 deaths, and around 1,200 people have died on the Israeli side, many of them civilians killed during the October 7th attack by Hamas that triggered the war.
As Senate Republicans blocked the advance of tens of billions of dollars in military and economic assistance for Ukraine, President Joe Biden berated their tactics.
Extreme Republicans are playing chicken with our national security, holding Ukraine's funding hostage to their extreme partisan border policies. And now they're willing to literally kneecap Ukraine on the battlefield and damage our national security in the process.
Yet this Wednesday, he also signaled openness to something GOP lawmakers want: border policy changes. The president warned of dire consequences for Kyiv and other U.S. allies if lawmakers don't act.
And we can't let Putin win. It's in our overwhelming national interest and the international interest of all our friends.
This Wednesday, the Biden administration announced that the U.S. is sending a new $175 million package of military aid to Ukraine.
Coming up next, December is upon us, but the Marshall community will forever remember a 53-year-old tragedy in November. Stay with us for a recap of news from across the tri-states.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Newscenter 88's Weekend Recap. I'm Waylon Smith.
And I'm Emma Johnson. Recreational marijuana users in Ohio are now in a state of limbo. Even though growing and possessing cannabis became legal for adults this Thursday, there is still no legal way to buy it. That's because Governor Mike DeWine and state lawmakers have yet to agree on legislation surrounding the rollout, a citizen-initiated statute that voters passed in November. The state Senate passed a bill this Wednesday, but the Ohio House adjourned without taking further action. Representatives are vowing to uphold voters' will as they decide how much cannabis people should be allowed to have, what THC levels are legal, and what the state tax rate should be.
Now, as promised, Jonathan Edwards' report on the 53rd anniversary of the plane crash and the fountain ceremony every November honoring the victims.
The 2023 Memorial Fountain Ceremony on Marshall's campus marked 53 years since time stood still within the Huntington community. For the family members of those lost in the tragedy, the memorial ceremony serves as a reminder that those who perished will not be forgotten.
It helps. It helps. I'm sure he'd be proud of us because we always show up. He drove from Ravenswood every year, but he's passed away now. So I go to help him. I come for them.
As the years go by, members of different generations view the impact of that fateful day from different perspectives, but reflect nonetheless.
I saw a busload of elementary school students from Boone County were here today, and one of these days, all the people that remember this, like me and people my age, 60s and 70s, we're going to be gone.
When things aren't going well, there's a lot worse stuff that could happen, right? And so for me too, just personally, knowing some of these family members, I have a 2-year-old now, and some of these folks were 2 when they lost both their parents. It just puts things in perspective, right?
53 years later, a campus never forgets. For News Center 88, I'm Jonathan Edwards.
Coming up next, an explosion leveled a home in Arlington, Virginia, as officers tried to serve a search warrant. Stay with us for a recap of the news from around the nation when News Center 88 returns right after this.
Touchdown, Thundering Herd!
Want to know the time of our next sports broadcast? Go to our website at www.marshall.edu/WMUL and find the entire sports schedule on the front page. You can even go one step further and listen to the game live right off our website, www.marshall.edu/WMUL. Yet another reason why we're the worldwide leader of Marshall sports coverage, WMUL 88.1.
Welcome back to the News Center 88 Weekend Recap. I'm Waylon Smith.
And I'm Emma Johnson. Authorities say a Texas man killed his parents and 4 others and wounded 2 police officers in a trail of violence stretching from San Antonio to Austin. 34-year-old Shane James was arrested and charged with 2 counts of capital murder after separate attacks in Austin and San Antonio that began Tuesday morning. James was arrested after he crashed his car that evening during a police pursuit. This Wednesday, authorities said the man's parents were found dead in their San Antonio home, in addition to 4 others who were found dead in 2 homes in Austin. Authorities also said that James had a history of mental health problems and a prior arrest on charges of assaulting a family member.
Police say the suspect in a deadly shooting at the University of Nevada had a list of targets at the school and at East Carolina University in North Carolina, where he once worked. The Clark County Sheriff said this Thursday that the suspect, identified as 67-year-old Anthony Polito, also had 150 additional rounds of ammunition on him before he was killed by the police. Officials say 3 faculty members were killed and a 4th was wounded this Wednesday. Authorities say that before the rampage, Polito had sent out 22 letters with no return address to university faculty members across the United States. The sheriff expressed his gratitude that no one else was injured.
And if it hadn't been for the heroic actions of one of those police officers who responded, there could have been countless additional lives taken.
Police in a Virginia suburb of the nation's capital are investigating a massive explosion at a house where officers were trying to serve a search warrant this Monday. The Arlington County Police Department said some officers received minor injuries in the explosion, but no one was transported to the hospital. No fatalities have been confirmed, and the status of the suspect is not yet known. Police said the incident began at about 4:45 p.m. when officers responded to reports of shots fired, which they later determined came from a flare gun. When police attempted to execute a warrant several hours after they initially responded, the suspect fired several rounds inside the home, and then the house exploded. Some Arlington residents claimed they could feel and hear the explosions from their own home.
Well, I was sitting in my living room watching television, and the whole house shook from the sound concussion. It wasn't an earthquake kind of tremor, but the whole house shook, and I could hear noises from things on the 2nd floor.
Coming up, Luke Hamilton will be in with the Metro Huntington weather forecast, and FM 88 Sports' John Boggess will be in with a recap of the week that was in Marshall Athletics. Stay with us.
Hey man, what's up with all the bags?
Oh, nothing. Just picked up a bunch of clothes and food to send to the relief effort overseas.
You know all that stuff is going to cost more to ship, and if it gets there, probably won't even be used.
At least I'm trying to do something.
It's good that you want to help, but there's an easier way. If you donate cash, the professionals will be able to purchase exactly what they need.
You know, I never looked at it that way.
It's plain and simple. Cash is the most efficient way to help disaster relief efforts. Even an amount as small as $10 can give the victims some of the necessities that are even more crucial while they're recovering.
Brought to you by the Center for International Disaster Information.
Welcome back to News Center 88. I'm Waylon Smith. Now Luke Hamilton joins us with the Metro Huntington weather forecast.
After an unusually warm Saturday in December with a high of 63 degrees, Sunday in Huntington came with light precipitation until noon. Along with the showers, Sunday's temperatures kickstart a cooler week with a low of 34 degrees Sunday night into the next morning. Next week, temperatures will drop even more, dipping down to the mid to high 20s. So don't expect to take your sweatshirt off for the remainder of the week because temperatures will sit at 50 or below starting on Monday. One bright spot for this week's weather is the sunny skies. Less rain will be expected this week with partly cloudy and sunny days ahead. The weekend weather word of the day is mountain breeze. Mountain breezes are wind patterns that develop during the night due to differential cooling on the mountain compared to nearby valleys. The opposite occurs during the day, which produces an upslope wind known as the valley breeze. Thank you to weatherology.com for that information. That concludes the Metro Huntington weather forecast. For News Center 88, I'm Luke Hamilton.
Thanks, Luke. Now John Boggess joins us with a recap of the week that was in Marshall athletics.
This week was jam-packed with basketball action at Marshall University as the Herd women's team took on the then 6-1 Florida Gators at the Cam Henderson Center in Huntington. The Herd put up 91 points in the win over Florida, who had 88 points. In a back-and-forth battle, the lead would change 7 times. Thundering Herd point guard Abby Beeman put up 24 points and 11 assists, tallying her third double-double of the season. Beeman sunk 5 three-pointers in the win while the Herd played without its leading scorer, Rashayla Scott. Head coach Kim Caldwell says that the win will give her squad confidence for the remainder of the season.
We didn't back down. We rose to the level of competition, so that was something we needed. And so hopefully it's something we can build off of because we needed that desperately.
The win marks Marshall's first against a Power 5 opponent since the 2007 season when Marshall defeated Missouri. The Marshall men's basketball team had a pair of home games this week. The first against the Miami Redhawks resulted in a loss 79-74 to an opponent the Herd has faced 77 times. On Wednesday, Marshall lost to Duquesne 72-85, making the Herd 2-6 for the season. FM 88 Sports' Luke Hamilton has the recap.
The Thundering Herd lost a pair of games this week against opponents it defeated last year. The Herd bested Duquesne in its last 3 matchups, but Marshall struggled with shooting as it shot 16% from the three-point line and 66% from the charity stripe. But both teams kept it close until the second half after a rough start offensively from both squads. Herd head coach Dan D'Antoni says the loss was against a formidable opponent.
All these are conference champion winners or type of teams. And we were a developing team, and it's going to be difficult. And fans got to just hang in there. We're going to play hard for them. And we pick off a few, but our season will really start going when we hit the conference, and we'll see what happens in about mid-February where we are.
The Dukes shot 37% from 3 and 40% from the field in the second half. After the loss to the Miami Redhawks last weekend, Coach D'Antoni said his squad wasn't a very good team. This week, he says,
that team I can coach. Team we played, the way we played Saturday, difficult.
One uplifting performance for Marshall came from Indiana State transfer Cam Crawford, who put up 20 points shooting 50% from the field. But Crawford's performance couldn't lift the Herd over the combined 40-point performance from Jimmy Clark III and Day-Day Grant. For FM 88 Sports, I'm Luke Hamilton.
Thanks, Luke. Marshall men's basketball will be back in action on Wednesday when it travels to face Toledo. The Marshall football team will be missing several players for the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl that it is set to play against UTSA on December 19th. 9 players have entered their name into the transfer portal, with Marshall quarterback Cam Fancher and wide receiver Caleb Coombs being some of the most notable players to do so. Fancher played all but 2 games this season, totaling 2,162 passing yards and recording 11 passing touchdowns and 4 rushing. Coombs led the team in receptions with 39. Other starters in the transfer portal are offensive lineman Trent Holler and tight end Sean Salas. Marshall wide receiver Jaden Harrison was recognized this week as a first-team All-American, the first Marshall player to receive the honor since defensive end Jonathan Godar in 2004. For FM 88 Sports, I'm John Boggess.
That concludes this first edition of Newscenter 88's Weekend Recap. Tune in next semester for a weekly recap of the top stories around the globe and the tri-state area. You can watch this newscast anytime on JMC TV or WMUL Radio's YouTube channel and on WMUL's SoundCloud page.
For Waylon Smith, John Boggess, Emma Gallus, Luke Hamilton, and the entire Newscenter 88 team, I'm Emma Johnson. Have a great week.